When I've made my list and I'm checking it twice, and I've got good little boys and girls who want funny books, I always turn into Nick Comic Culture for the latest information on the greatest books that we all love. So sit back and enjoy Nick Comic Culture.
Happy holidays, everyone. This is Nick from Comic Culture, bringing you Nick at Night, the non-spoiler review show of the comic books we picked up last week, 22nd of December. Don't want to miss it. Stay tuned. Welcome back. So I hope you guys had a great Christmas, looking forward to a great new year and everything, staying safe, staying healthy, seeing some friends and family, because that's what it's all about. Holiday season adjusted our review show time drop, and that is okay. We're going to get into it straight away with Marvel, going into Moon Knight number 6. Now, you guys know I'm a little bit hard on Moon Knight because I don't know anything about the character. I didn't necessarily think it was an outstanding series when it first kind of started. It was kind of trailing on, a lot of different enemies popping in and out, Moon Knight taking care of him pretty quickly. The art I had to grow into. Now that I've grown into it, I love the art. The art's probably my favorite thing about this book right now. So it's just so radiant and so vibrant, and the colors are so interesting. I don't necessarily like the way that people are drawn, like facial-wise, especially Mark Spector in a couple of these panels and whatnot, but I think the coloring and the shadowing is what really, really is standing out to me the most. The story is interesting. We have our protagonist, Hunter's Moon, coming back into the story, kind of saving the day, and then we kind of go over his origin story. Why is he so pissed off at Mark Spector as Moon Knight? Why does he think he's not doing the job he's supposed to be doing right now? So it was a pretty interesting kind of a backstory while Mark's getting kind of healed up over here, and we see Mark kind of getting rejuvenated, right? And it's all because of Hunter's Moon, which is like an unlikely ally. So it was pretty interesting. Interesting story if you're in the Hunter's Moon and everything, but I'm reading it for the art and the color, honestly. And I don't know anything about Moon Knight, so this is my way of like kind of double dipping into that as well, learning more about the character and enjoying some crazy artwork and a decent story so far. I'm going to say it's a decent story. It's not blowing me away. It's not blowing me away. I'm glad so many people, you do not believe how many people say this is like their favorite Marvel book right now, or one of the best books of the year right now. I am so happy for you that you love that book. It's just not hitting me in the same way. And so I hope it does soon, because I'm really jealous. I really, really want just a banger Marvel book right now. And I'm just not really finding it outside of like maybe Inferno, but Inferno feels like homework sometimes. I digress. Going over to Venom, number 3 from Ram V. Ram V's still writing this one, and Hitch on the artwork. So I'm becoming a little bit worried about this book just because I don't feel Ram's presence. I don't feel his voice in this book. I'm not a big fan of Hitch's artwork either. And so I'm just kind of stuck right now. I don't really care about Dylan Brock too much. I want more Eddie back in my life. We have a little bit of betrayal in this book right here. It's mostly focused on Dylan. It's about Venom and it's about Dylan, and Dylan looks at Venom and just kind of sees his dad still, and he's trying to reconcile all of that. And so, it's an interesting story. I'm wondering where it goes. We kind of have to get a little bit more into it. I mean, we're 3 issues in, and every time I read it, I'm a little bit hesitant. I'm a little bit worried about what I'm going to read. And I shouldn't feel like that with this creative team and this kind of character, especially coming off of the run we just had with Venom. So I'm a little bit hesitant. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep reading it because I just have faith in Ram. And I like the Venom character, especially after the last arc that we had. And so I'm just going to keep reading it, and I'm going to keep hoping that something's going to turn around. It's all going to be connected. The story is going to be so compelling, it makes me look past the art that I'm not personally enjoying. So yeah, I'm just kind of keeping an open mind. I'm keeping an open mind right now. We're going to keep going through Venom. If you're expecting it to be as explosive and just as great as the start of the last Venom, the Donny Cates run, you might be disappointed. Again, I hope you're enjoying the book. I hope you're loving it. It's just not hitting all the right beats for me right now. And that's okay, because we all read these things and we all have a different opinion about them. And that's what's beautiful about all this. So that's actually the only Marvel books that I read this week. I'm going to go over to DC. I'm going to start with Refrigerator Full of Heads. This is from the Joe Hill House Comics Black Label. This is issue number 3. So what I did like about this one is it provided us some backstory on this axe weapon that we had in Basket Full of Heads. We know it exists in this universe, in this one. It's actually an issue 2, or it's a volume 2. direct continuation from volume number 1, but we have the introduction in the first issue with a bunch of other relics that have unique properties as well, which is pretty cool. So it's not just about the axe, it's about a lot of other things. And we have this biker gang who's kind of hired to retrieve these artifacts. And we understand who's kind of behind, who's the head of all this, who's hired that gang, who these people are, who these 2 people are that we met in this issue here who are hunting down the axe. We get their backstory as well. And we kind of understand what it means when you kind of bring all these relics together. So pretty interesting story, expanding the universe. It's not like the revelations aren't extraordinary in this book, but I think it's still fun. It's building on the story that it laid in volume number 1 in a pretty cool, fun way. There's a lot of humor in this book, obviously, when you have an axe that can kill people, and yet their heads are still alive and talking and things like that. Interesting book. It's just one of those fun books to read. It's not going to blow you away, but it's just funny and humorous, and it's got a decent story that's expanding right now beyond this one magical object, right? So I kind of like that. That was pretty interesting. All right, moving over to Nightwing 87 from Tom Taylor. This was that issue that was one panel, or each page is a full page spread, and they kind of work the panel through. And so there's multiple Nightwings in each page. They're telling the story as it kind of flows from section to section, which at first when I was reading it, I was like, why don't more books do this? We don't see this very often. And maybe it's just me, but like I'm reading indies and Big Two and things like that, and I never see this style like this before. This kind of layout, this kind of flow. And I'm wondering, why isn't this done more often? And maybe there's a reason. Maybe there's a reason why it's not done more often, because, tradition is that you just do some kind of a panel grid and you go from there. But it was kind of interesting to read a book like that, the way that it's laid out here. So I enjoyed the process of reading the book. The actual story, it was a throwaway story. It was just a transition story between where we left off Nightwing. We got into Fear State with a tie-in. We're coming out of that now. This is just a filler issue in between the actual run, just kind of reinforcing the good that Dick Grayson wants to do here. And yeah, that's pretty much all we got right here. It was an interesting thing. You spend a lot of time checking out the backgrounds and see if there's any little Easter eggs and things in there. There is a few things here and there, and there's a lot of things that you would expect Tom Taylor to be putting in books that you'll see in backgrounds and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, it was fairly interesting. It was a cute little story. Did it have anything to do with the main objective? Loosely. We got reminded that he got a lot of money and that he wants to do good with it, and he wants to save as many people as he can. That's all we got. So I think I enjoyed the aesthetic, or I enjoyed the gimmick of the issue. And it's not really a gimmick. It was fun. It was interesting. It was more of a fill-in story, or filler story, in between kind of transitioning out of Fear State, which, sometimes you need those issues. Sometimes you need them for sure. So speaking of kind of transition fill-in period issues right here, we have Catwoman number 38 from Rom V with that amazing Jenny Frison cover on here. This is another transition story. I thought Rom dropped off on the last issue. It was kind of the conclusion of the whole Alleytown fight and everything like that to free all those people. And this one right here is kind of like the aftermath. People are starting to pick up the pieces. We have Selena Kyle being picked up by the police, being questioned, being interrogated. And it's kind of like an Ocean's 11 type situation. She's 20 steps ahead of the cops, is able to answer all their questions very well. She's kind of playing dumb in the whole time. And she finds a way out of that situation, which was pretty humorous in its own way. I think it was a pretty easy issue, I would imagine, for Rom to write, perhaps. I mean, I don't know what it takes to write these things, but the guy's a genius, and I'm pretty sure he was asked to kind of crank out one more transition one to kind of close up the loop here, and he probably just did that. So I appreciated the humor and the way that it was done. It's a different artist on this one, so you're going to notice a different art change. We get a little bit of Father Valley in here too, so he's not dead and gone. So that's going to be kind of fun to see whoever picks him up later. So it was pretty cool. I think it was a nice little tip of the hat. See you later. Thanks for everything kind of an issue, which I did appreciate because I've been enjoying that Rom V run overall. So next we're going to go into Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, number 6 from Tom King. I'm telling you, I absolutely love this run. I love this run, and I love it because Tom King has found a way to make a Supergirl book just feels so melancholy, have so much emotion, and it's paired with like the perfect art style in here that's super colorful. The expressions are very interesting and very impactful. And we have a Supergirl who's extremely desperate, who just wants to get the job done, and she's been just hit in the face constantly, and it goes over her backstory of Krypton, what she experienced before the planet went away, all the different traumas and everything that she had to live through. Kal-El wasn't around for the explosion or anything like that, but she was, and she was here, and has to go through so much pain and suffering, and she had to help a lot of people and really push herself to the limit. This book is all about describing the trials and tribulations of Kara, which I think is amazing, and it's written so well, and it's just so melancholy and like depressing, yet hopeful and inspiring at the same time. I'm just loving the way that this is written. I love the way it's drawn. I enjoy the story. We're only 6 issues in. There's 8 issues in the run. I don't care if 7 and 8 even suck. I'm already satisfied. I'm already satisfied with the 1 through 6 right now to make this one of the best books that I've read. Period. I'll even say period on that one, not even of the year. But Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, I can't stress it enough. You guys got to pick it up. It's not going to be for everybody. You might get through issue 2. You might read issue 1 and go, this seems fun, but it's kind of dialogue heavy or monologue heavy. Issue 2 is going to make you question whether or not you want to continue reading the book. But if you enjoy that writing style, that dialogue, that dialect that he writes in, and the perspective that they're writing in, if you enjoy the first 2 issues like that, it's going to continue that same theme going forward. And then it's going to introduce a lot of tragedy and a lot of trials and tribulations that I think just stack on top of each other in a real beautiful way. And that's where we are with issue number 6. All right, going over to the last DC book we read this week was Batman One Dark Knight, written and drawn by Jock. And I'm not too familiar with Jock's writing. I've seen some of his covers in the past. One I think that sticks out in my mind was that Noctera #1, where he had our main character kind of silhouetted by a spotlight from the back. And that was really interesting and stood out to me. And then I'm just so ignorant on Jock and their work that I did not know that there's any writing. But the first thing I noticed when I flipped through this book is, first, it's oversized because it's DC Black Label. And second, I'm looking at some of this paneling and coloring and stuff, and it just kind of blew me away. And so I was really excited to read this book, and it's an interesting story. It's like it's a book 1, and it's about transporting this one real powerful villain that I don't know anything about from Arkham to Blackgate. And there's like a political motive of why they want to transport this person. And so Batman's kind of shepherding and kind of monitoring this transport, and all these different mobs and all these different villains and stuff like that. All these different gangs are kind of coming out to either like stop it or stop Batman or attack or take advantage of the situation of this guy being transported. So it's kind of like a Batman Dark Knight Joker kind of being transported, and all hell breaks loose, and it gets kind of sabotaged on the way out, and Batman's kind of watching it all happen. It was a very interesting, compelling story here. The art really kind of takes center stage, but the story is just fun. If you're looking for just kind of like a little one-off Batman book, which is crazy art and a little interesting story right here, check out Batman One Dark Knight. I think it's going to be a couple issues because this says issue 1 on here. One Dark Knight book 2 comes out in February, so really looking forward to that. Batman's in a real tough situation at the end of this book, so it's going to pick up from there, and I think it's going to be really compelling and really fun, and it'll be really interesting to see, especially if you want to read some more Batman that's not in the kind of storyline that we're in right now. Check out One Dark Knight. All right, that is it for the big 2. We're going to go over to Boom Studios next with Eat the Rich. This is issue number 5, the final issue of this run right here from Sarah Gailey. Now, I liked this book. I understood the premise in the beginning, and the title kind of threw you off in the beginning. This wasn't Eat the Rich. It was more like Eat the Poor in a way, or Kill the Poor. And so we had this really interesting setup where basically servants were kind of pledging their life and their bodies to their masters in a way, in exchange for like insane health insurance, security for the family, things like that. So if you were somebody who just had no other option, you can pretty much give your all to these people forever in servitude, and in turn you're going to be reimbursed and your family's going to be well off. So that was an interesting dynamic. We saw it through the eyes of a girl coming into the family. She was like a boyfriend or soon-to-be fiance of this one man, and his parents are kind of in this whole thing. And so we understood what was going on through her eyes. It was quite shocking. There was some interesting moments of how she got to understand these different rules by talking to different people, whether it was her boyfriend's mom or the boyfriend's dad, or just witnessing it, or even talking to some of the servants directly on there. There were some other relationships that were formed, which seemed a little bit weird at the time. It was kind of not really needed or important to the story, but it was in there, so it was in there. This issue really explores the extent and the reach of the rich and their tradition here, and it's not really just a localized thing to this house or this town. This is actually a global effort, and she sees the impact of that and how dangerous these people could actually be. So she's faced with a tough decision, and she makes her decision to kind of escape. And so I'm not going to spoil how that all happens here. The ending kind of fell a little flat. It felt like we had all this buildup in 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then in issue 5 it like resolves the buildup and then resolves everything else, and everyone lives happily ever after. I think the path she chose in this was described as an impossible path to take, that no matter what she did or where she went, she would be found and taken care of. And she took that path and then was just like, no, everything's cool. We're going to chill on the beach for a while. So I was like, that seems kind of weird. So I think the premise of the story is interesting. I don't think they really nailed the execution of the ending. I think it's a fun read. I just don't think it's going to be very memorable going on. I don't think a year or two from now people are really going to talk about the book. I think I had a good time reading it, but the ending fell a little bit flat for me, but I enjoyed the overall concept, just not exactly the execution. The art was decent in this book. It didn't blow me away, but it had its moments for sure. But yeah, Eat the Rich #5, not a bad series, but not one that just completely blew me away from Boom. The last Boom book that I read this week was from Jamestown and the Fourth. We have House of Slaughter, issue #3. Got that blue label cover right here because I thought it was pretty interesting. I like this farm. I like the ritual that we just read Erica go through in Something's Killing the Children. I think that's a cool little ritual that they go through. We had a little ritual in the other one when one person comes from a different house and gets initiated into the other house, and that was Jace, his character, going through that in House of Slaughter #2. I think I'm digging everything about the lore of the different houses, what the different masks mean, the politics between them, their different jobs and roles and whatnot, and what it takes to bounce between houses, if that's even a real thing. We learned that it was. We learned that it's a pretty traumatic experience, that it's a really interesting ritual. So I'm liking the ritual. I'm liking the formality of the houses and the whole organization. Aaron and Jace, it's an interesting dynamic, it's an interesting like couple. This is a book that really explores their backstory. They jump between the present and the past a little bit about how they kind of flourished as a kind of like a couple, and then how that kind of ties up at the very, very end there, and in a pretty explicit way. So this is a pretty interesting book. It's focusing more on their relationship, which if you're into it, then great. I'm more into like the houses and the lore and the monster slaying. It's the House of Slaughter, so we're learning more about the people of the House of Slaughter, not necessarily the monsters and the demons that are out there terrorizing the place. So if you liked Something's Killing the Children just because you liked Erica Slaughter and some of the other people taking on monsters and saving kids and saving the whole town, this book is going to be in that world, but it's a whole separate part of the world focusing on two other people and their relationship as it flourishes. So it's not a bad book, but if you're expecting the same exact book as Something's Killing the Children, it's going to be entirely different, but set in that same world. So not bad. I like when the world kind of blows out a little bit. It reminds me of like watching John Wick and then watching John Wick 2 and 3. It kind of explores that realm a little bit more, and then it's still focused on the main character. This is just a secondary character and then another secondary character that's been brought in as well. So House of Slaughter, not as great as Something's Killing the Children by far, I would say, but still pretty interesting. The last book we read this week was from Image Comics, Rick Remender, A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance. This is issue #3, and I'm telling you, I'm going to have to reread this whole series over again, and I feel like I need to read issue 1 and 2 and 3 again before 4 comes out, just because I'm missing all these little nuances. We have a very kind of a timid, not really confrontational guy that we're following here, who's finding himself in these positions where he's around these killers all the time. And we learned there's like this black web network of assassins and hired killers. And he's inserting himself into that world very purposefully, and I don't know what his exact intentions are. Maybe it's quite obvious for other people, but as I'm reading these issues, you learn a little bit more about why he's doing the things that he's doing, but you don't know why he's just not stopping it. He's very, very timid and very shy and very kind of like cowardly in the face of all these killers and these monsters out here, but his intentions are good, and I'm just not sure exactly what he thought he was going to do in these situations. Maybe he thought he was going to be real big and brave and stop these killers and things like that. Maybe he's just trying to mess up this organization. If it's real obvious to you guys, let me know down below in the comments how you guys are interpreting this book right now. But I feel like this would read better as a trade because I'm not remembering all these little nuances from issue to issue. And so I'm having to flip through this book a few different times, even when I get to the end, because I'm just kind of confused about how we got there and what maybe his intentions were versus what actually happened. So A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, a book that I'm going to have to dissect a little bit more as I read the future issues. But pretty interesting book, and if you're not on it, pick it up if you kind of want something to dissect. All right, guys, that's what I picked up this week. That's what I thought about it. I'm going to go ahead and pick out a few issues that I would recommend people get if they are into these things. So I'm going to start with, and honestly, it's not like a super banger week for me, but Supergirl, Girl of Tomorrow, or Woman of Tomorrow rather, issue number 6. This is an absolute must read if we have the same tastes. If you were me, that's what you'd have to be reading for sure. I would say also One Dark Night from Jock was absolutely great, especially in this kind of lineup right here. And I'm going to blow a lot of minds right now. I'm going to blow a lot of minds, but I'm going to say Moon Knight. Whew, Moon Knight number 6. I enjoyed this issue more than probably on the end of the other issues, but there's a lot of things still wrong with it, but I'm enjoying it more and more the more I read it. So I know it's going to bring a lot of smiles to a lot of people's faces. So those are the ones that I would definitely recommend for this week. Let me know what you guys read down below in the comments. Continue the conversation down there too. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of these things. Fill in some of the gaps for me if you can. I would be really appreciative if you did that. Like, subscribe, share, hit that bell notification for future videos. Happy holidays, everybody. See you in the comments.
And as our friend Bobby G exclaimed just the other night, a hearty station to all, and treat each other right.